Morning, everybody. I'd like you to consider with me this morning something the Bible refers to as stewardship. It's not a word that's used that often, really, in the New Testament. You'll see it in a couple of parables in Luke, and it has a couple of individual verses, but it is a concept, the concept of stewardship, sometimes translated management, maybe in your Bible, but I'll stay with stewardship. It's a concept that is all throughout the scriptures. And it's something we all need to be reminded about, perhaps, or maybe led to believe more than we do about the value of stewardship, how it works. And that's what we'll look at this morning as we break into this topic. There's the word in the original language in the New Testament, the Greek language. And the strict definition of it is the responsibility and management of a household. That's stewardship, as the Bible describes it. Now, that's very specific. And of course, it is much, much broader than that. But just to look at it from that perspective, the management of a household, this is not like a butler. This is someone who has responsibility for the functioning, the full functioning of a household. We know that, for instance, Abraham had Eleazar was his steward, it says, and Joseph had a steward when he was in Egypt, and that steward was the one that put the money in their bags. And so this could relate to the finances of a home, the education of the children of a home, perhaps, all the things that went into a household. If they had a steward, the steward would be given responsibility in those areas, and there were certain expectations, as we'll see. And so that's the strict definition, and we broaden it quite a bit as we go. Now, in thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, who's a good example of a steward? Like who was the first steward in the Bible? Well, you go all the way back to who? Adam. Adam was told by God to tend and keep the garden, dress and keep the garden. Tend means to work the garden. And to keep the garden, it really means to build a hedge around it, and it comes to be defined as to guard the garden. So he had a big responsibility, and he was the only one around. This was pre-Eve, pre-Eve. Adam was created, and then the garden was created, and he was put in the garden and given a stewardship of the garden. Okay, and so if we take that to be a truth, we see some qualities of stewardship from the very beginning. Looking at Adam, one is he had an ability to do what God had assigned him to do. God is never going to throw you out there like you get a new job and you have to work the cash register and you have no idea what the cash. Have you ever been in a store and a restaurant or something, and there's a girl, it's her first day there, and you ask for something and she just stares, she has no idea what the buttons are. God doesn't do things like that. He will give you an ability in your stewardship from himself to do the job that he wants you to do, and to do it well, if you want to do it well. And that's another discussion we'll have here. So there was an ability. And in thinking and broadening away from the household part, well, actually kind of relates now that I think about it. Let's think of a stewardship that we all could relate to. How about motherhood? Motherhood is a stewardship where God is going to give you responsibility over children. Well, that's a big responsibility. I mean, you got these little souls in front of you. Now, think about it. When I want to learn about something, say I want to learn about how to wire a three-way switch, well, I'll just go to YouTube and I'll go watch some videos and I'll learn how to do it, and then I'll practice, and then I'll know how to do it. Or anything else I want to learn, I just get on there, learn about I just watch a video on the history of the copper age, learn all about that. Is there any YouTube video about how to still be joyful after you've only gotten 2 hours of sleep that day? I mean, is there any place you can go to learn about how to be a mother? I don't think so. And I've seen it, and we see it all the time. Girls get married and they're girls, right? And then they have a baby. All of a sudden they're mothers. It's like, how do you know how to hold the baby? I mean, they just automatically, it's just a perfect little baby. And they know all about things. Their heart is for this child. Everything changes. They're even physiologically, their hormones changes, all kinds of things. Do you see how God is providing for the stewardship of children through motherhood? It's a wonderful thing. They even have hips. Have you noticed that? When I have to hold one of these grandchildren, it's like a bicep exercise for me. I mean, I just saw it over here, just popped right on the hip, just sits right there. Even their anatomy is made for this. And so this is important, and it's an example of stewardship and how it can work. So there's an ability. God will always equip you to do what he asks you to do. Don't ever doubt it. You're never thrown out there an on-the-job training. And then along with that, there's a responsibility. I mentioned that certainly is in raising children, a huge responsibility. But in any stewardship, God has an expectation that you will do what he's asked you to do to the best of your ability and the abilities that he gives you. You see a verse, 1 Corinthians 4:2. It's required in stewards that a man be found faithful. You see the responsibility there. Just because you have a responsibility, a stewardship, doesn't mean you're going to be faithful in it, but God wants you to be, and he's equipped you so that you can be. Another similar verse, I love this, Psalm 101:6. I will look with favor on the faithful in the land. God's looking for things to go right. He wants you to do the best you can. That applies to motherhood and everything. Everything that you're a steward of. Could be your finances, could be something here in the meeting, through gifts and skills, but he wants you to do your very best. And if you do, he looks with favor on you. That's an important thing to know when you're going through the day-to-days of whatever it is God has brought you to. Even your job, your daily employment is all part of stewardship, and we'll look at that in a little more detail. Now, was Adam responsible in his stewardship? How did that go for him? No, he wasn't. And that's the responsibility part. God wanted him to be. He always does. God provided for him to be what he wanted him to be. But Adam was irresponsible. And that leads us to another point, is there is an accountability in stewardship. It says in Romans, in the later chapters, every man will give an account of himself to God. And that's not just sinners, that's every man. Christians, unbelievers, everyone will give an account of themselves in the context they find themselves in to God. And that's part of stewardship, is accountability. Now, a lot of the references to steward or stewardship are found in parables in Luke, and Luke 16, which we'll look at in a few minutes, is one of them. And in that parable, it's called the parable of the unjust steward. So you get the point of the parable, and it's a very difficult parable to interpret. I'm not going to get into the parable part of it, but draw some lessons from it. The owner, the master, he says, "What is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your stewardship." You see, God is, he's not just blind to these things. He's watching over the stewards. He wants to see how you're doing, not to hammer you. He wants the best from you. He wants to encourage you to do your best job. And in the case of this parable, that steward was not doing the job that he should have done, and there was an accountability. Now, one of the verses that is not in the parables, and there's just a few, that 1 Corinthians 4 is one of them, is this interesting verse in Titus. It says that overseers, episkopos in the Greek, leaders in the church, any church, it calls them stewards of God. It's that same Greek word. They are stewards of God. These principles apply to all stewards, no matter what their stewardship is. So in the case, we just said on this verse for a second, in the case of overseers or leaders in the church, they have an ability to do that responsibility that comes from God. It's a gift. It's not a personality trait or anything like that. Pastoral care is a gift that only God gives. We hear a lot about my pastor, this pastor. Okay. Are they gifted, or are they just assigned? We need to have spiritual empowerment in that particular role, in that stewardship. And of course, they are responsible to do that job and to do it to the best of their ability, become better at what they're doing. And then ultimately they are accountable to God. We read that the leaders in Hebrews, I believe it is, the leaders in the church will give an account to God, not for me and how I functioned under their leadership, but for themselves and how they did their job. Their stewardship, their responsibilities. There is an accountability. And I think, too, in that sense, that there should be an accountability to those whom they lead. We should have input and be able to have a dialogue about how things are going in that regard. That's an interesting verse to think about, that overseers are stewards of God, not stewards of the diapers, but stewards of God, stewards of spiritual things. Very, very important role. I'll just touch on that. Now, one thing about stewardship, and back to that original definition, you're not the owner of the house, right? You're not the owner of the house. You're the steward of whatever the owner assigns to you. So there's ownership and there's stewardship. We got to get that straight. Sometimes we've kind of just taken ownership of everything. No, it's something God has given you, provided for you, enabled you to do. He's the owner and you're the steward. Just some verses that bring that out. As far as ownership, Psalm 89:11 in the New Living Translation says, "The heavens are yours, the earth is yours, everything in the world is yours." That's pretty clear. And then Ezekiel 18:4, God says, "All souls are mine." All souls are mine. Every single soul, he owns them all. And all about what a soul is. We'll look at that in a little more detail here in just a moment. And then as far as stewardship goes, we got that right now. God owns everything, everything, everything. The Andromeda Galaxy, and we'll look at a lot of specifics in our life, our skills and talents and things like that. Well, regarding man, we know this verse in Psalm 8. It says, "You've made him to have dominion over the works of thy hands." Not that we own anything. It's his work, his hands, his stuff, and we have dominion over it because he's given it to us. And a similar verse, Psalm 115:16, says, "The heavens are the Lord's, but the earth hath he given to the children of men." That doesn't mean that I own the earth. It means I've been given responsibilities in the physical world. I have a stewardship or many stewardships in this life. You get it? So there you have the owner and the steward. Excuse me. So God is the owner of everything, the physical world. Well, there's more things that he owns, not just the Andromeda Galaxy. He owns time because he made it, right? Evening and morning were the first day. He owns time, and he's given you stewardship over that time. How are you doing there? How are you using your time as a steward of it? Remember, God's made you able. He's given you insight into things. He's you're responsible for what you do with time, and you're accountable really for what you do with your time. Are you wasting your time? How many people waste time? Come on, every hand goes up. We all waste time, one way or the other. And we all know we do. And some of us make decisions to not do that as much or at all. And some of us don't. We just keep wasting time. Time is a precious thing. You get 86,400 seconds. That's it. Not one more, not one less. What are you doing with it? He's also the owner of your body. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm talking about your human body, this thing here. Your body is not a disposable item, you know. But what if you bought a car and you drove the car, a brand new car, beautiful car, you drove the car, and all of a sudden the engine seized up and you couldn't drive the car anymore because you never maintained the car. You never changed the oil, never did anything. That's how some people treat their bodies. They just run it and run it and run it until something breaks. You don't need to do that. You need to be a steward of your body. That has to do with sleep, diet, attitude, so many things. And that's something to think about. So he is the owner of your talents and your skills. These are not gifts. These are your talents, things that you're good at. These are real practical things. Barry's very good at construction. Well, he has a stewardship over those skills God has given him. Yeah, he's developed them over time and perfected them maybe. and we all can grow in our skills and our talents. But how are we using them for God? That's the thing. He's the owner. You're the steward. You're the manager of the household. You're the manager of your skills and talents, whatever they may be. There's an interesting verse in the Psalms that says, by my God, I can leap over a wall. That's pretty good skill, to leap over a wall. But that just shows me that God gives us abilities to do things. People say, oh, you've got really a gift of music. Well, actually, no, it's a skill. And I went to school, practiced a lot, and et cetera. That's what we're good at. Some people are good at sewing. Some people are good at knitting. You know, they work at these things, and they can use these skills for God as they steward them properly. How about money? Deuteronomy says, it is he that has given you the power to make wealth. Oh, you mean it wasn't my business acumen? Well, it was, but you're stewarding it properly. It says 1 Timothy 6, I think, instruct those that are rich in this world to be ready to give. See, that's stewardship of the gift of business. Some people are very good at it, and we rely on them. Somebody had to have an upper room, right? Somebody had to own an upper room, and we're thankful for that man who had that room, that they could do those things. And that's just how it works with stewardship of money. And then I mentioned gifts. Well, gifts are not skills. Gifts are gifts. When he ascended on high, he gave gifts to men, spiritual gifts. Are you operating in your spiritual gift, stewarding that gift, maybe nurturing that gift, fanning it into the flames, all this sort of stuff. And then finally, remember, all souls are mine. Your soul, you're a steward over your soul. What's your soul? It's your mind, your emotions. It's who you are. It's you. You're the steward of who you are. Your mind, you know, God owns your mind, but he's given it to you to steward. So thoughts and things like this, you're in charge. You have a responsibility. You're thinking about weird things, quit. I've got it on my refrigerator. Stop it. 2 Corinthians 10. Stop it. Stop thinking like that. Start thinking differently. This is all stewardship. This is what we need to do with our souls. He's the owner. We're the stewards of all of these things. Now, we have our own ideas about how to operate. I said earlier that we kind of think we're the owners of everything sometimes. And I want to bring this out a little bit. We make our plans, we set goals. That's good. It's New Year's, you probably have written goals down, things you want to accomplish this year. You should do that. I should still do that. I haven't done that yet. I'm thinking about them, but we got to write them down, put them down, talk about it, and pray about it, and all of that. That's all good. We should do that. I want you to consider a verse with me here. Proverbs 16:3. Now think about this. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Could say thoughts in your translation. Your plans will be established. Commit your work to the Lord, your plans will be established. Does that make sense? Isn't it like backwards? Shouldn't you commit your plans to the Lord and then your work will be established? That's how I think it should be, but that's not what it says. So what does it mean? Commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. Established here means to stand erect, to be firm, to be stable, established, definite, solid. Okay. Let's have a hypothetical here. Say you have a young family and you want to develop a spiritual focus in your family with your children. Okay. And you're really not doing that right now. You know, you're busy going to work and leaving the kids at home and all this, you know, typical stuff. But no, you determine in your mind, no, I want to develop spiritual time with my family. So here's what I'm going to do. For a half an hour in the evening, I'm not going to do what I would do. Okay, I'm not going to watch TV. If you're watching TV, I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm not going to be doing things that I have to do. I'm setting aside, and you're talking to the Lord about this, I'm setting aside 30 minutes where I'm going to spend with my children. Okay, that's your plan. If that's all it is, it ends right there. Okay, what if you start actually doing that, the work? All right, and so you make that, you get that in your head, and you say, okay, And tonight I'm going to start. And you actually do. And your wife goes, whoa, what happened to him? No, you actually do that. You actually do spend time. Well, that's your work. Commit your work to the Lord. And that plan that you made, it will be firm. See how that works? You commit your work to the Lord, the things that you want to accomplish, and do them. Then these plans and dreams and goals and all the stuff that we write down will be established. If that's what you want to do and you start doing it, and it's something that's in the will of the Lord and something he wants you to be responsible in, guess what? It's going to happen. And he will look with favor on the faithful in the land. He will give favor to you because you're stepping in directions that he wants. And you can apply this to anything, any kind of goal you might have. You might have a financial goal. Say, I want to get out of debt, or I want to earn more money. Well, I'm going to take if your job would allow it, say you have overtime options. I'm going to take 2 days a week and I'm going to work overtime, and I'm going to put that money into whatever, into a specific thing. You commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established, and he'll bless that, and he'll bless you with favor. Another verse very similar, one of my favorite verses, Proverbs 3:6. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths, or make your paths straight. It's the same thing. In all whose ways? Your ways, your decisions, your work, your actions, your desires. Acknowledge him, and then boom, your plans will be established. They will be made straight. Now, James has a very funny take on this. In chapter 4, there's a little story. And without turning there, it says, come now, you who say, tomorrow we'll go into such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make gain. That sounds good. Well, that would take a lot of planning, wouldn't it? Come now, we'll go to such and such a city. Well, you got to decide what city you're going to go to. That means you're probably looking at the demographics of that city, all the things that might go into that. And maybe they've got Groupons there. I don't know. But you got to make these decisions what town you're going to go into. And then you're going to stay there a year. Well, that's a long time. That's not a weekend visit. So you got to get some housing. You're going to have to figure out, do I rent a house, or maybe we can buy one in the market, or a B&B or something, I don't know. And then you're going to have transportation for a year. You're going to rent a car, buy one maybe, or bring one from where you're living. I don't know. And then you're going to buy and sell. You got to buy, you might have to get some financing in order to buy the inventory. And then you're going to sell. Well, how are you going to sell? You're going to do it on the internet, or are you going to set up a storefront? There's all these things you got to think about. It's easy just to say what that verse says. That's chapter 4, verse 13 to 14. But how about doing them? And then, good. Then we're going to make some money. We're going to make some money. We're going to do all this stuff, plan all these things, set all this stuff into motion, and then just watch it happen. And then, come on, bring in the gravy. What does the Bible say about that? I love the NIV. Says, you don't, and you have to say this with a certain inflection. You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. If you could have one of those living Bibles, that's how he would say it. Maybe with an English accent, but it'll still be like that. You don't even, what do you know? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You got your big goal sheet here, all these things you want to do. You don't know. You don't know. And what else does it say? It says, your life is a vapor. New Living Translation says it's a morning fog. Not there very long, right? Now, I've been to a few personal development seminars that I've never heard that said. They always like to get crowd. Come on, everybody, say this with me. My life is a vapor. Louder now. My life is a vapor. You never hear that. They're always singing that Unstoppable song. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm so powerful, I don't need batteries to play. That's what they're singing all the time. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and your life is just a vapor. Now, that's not to make you depressed. That's just reality. And we have to face reality. So it says you ought to say, this is how you should have approached that whole thing. Is there anything wrong with any of those things? Well, yes and no. You ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall do this or that. So, okay, well then all that stuff I mentioned, we'll just commit it to the Lord and we'll pray about it. And if it's the Lord's will, then he'll bless. Is that what that verse says? In your translation or any translation? No, I left a very important word out on purpose. If the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. Really? It gets down to that level? In stewardship, it does. Remember, he's the owner of everything. In geometry, they have what's called the given. My teacher used to call it the big G. The given. Given is straight line, shortest distance between 2 points. You know, sum of the angles of a triangle is 360 degrees. The given, the big G. That's the given. Or is it? No, it's not. You'd think it would be. What'd you think about this morning when you woke up? What was the first thing when you opened your eyes up? You thank God that you were opening your eyes up? You should. Why don't you start doing that? You commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. Let's make that, let's be thankful when we wake up as the first thought that comes to our mind. Not what kind of coffee am I going to have today or creamer or something. Let's thank God that I'm alive. This is basic. This is stewardship. He's given me my life. You should have said, if we shall live and do this or that, if the Lord wills. See, this is it. And once you have this perspective that I'm a steward of all that he's given me, then get to work. Then get busy. Then make your plans. Get things done. J.S. Bach was one of the greatest classical composers, music composer, maybe the greatest. Could be argued that he was the greatest. No, he was certainly the greatest in volume. They asked Beethoven what he thought about Bach. In German, a lot of the words mean things. They're like pictorial. In Bach, or Bach in German, means brook or a little stream. And they asked him, what do you think about Bach? This is Beethoven now. And he said, I don't know what the word is in German, but they said they should have called him Ocean. Because he wrote so many things, thousands and thousands of compositions. They don't even know how his wife used to write the manuscript out. It's overwhelming, all of his compositions and his genius, his skills that God gave him to steward. And in every composition, I've read this in school, at the top of the composition, whether it was a 2-part harpsichord invention or the B minor mass, it didn't matter. He wrote 2 things. He wrote, Jesus help me. And at the bottom, he wrote, for the glory of God. That could be your composition, right? That could be your stewardship. And you wonder, oh, don't wonder, we know. Why was he the greatest? There you go. You're the owner. I'm the steward. Ecclesiastes 9:10 says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Anything left out there? That's diapers and dishes, ladies, okay? Well, maybe I'm stretching it a little bit on the diapers there, but you know what I mean, okay? Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. There's something called the Protestant work ethic. Have you ever heard of that? It's pretty much developed by the Puritans. And they believed that there's no separation between sacred and secular in your daily activities. In other words, your work Your job is a function of worship. And so they truly took Ecclesiastes 9 to the limit. Whatever your hands do it with all your might. They felt that everything you do, your job, your menial labor, chopping down a tree, cooking a pot of soup, it's all an act of worship. I think they're onto something. I think that's how our life should be. Jesus helped me for the glory of God. Everything is a function of worship. And in terms of doing things well, I just remember this when we were building an addition on our house. We had a lot of subcontractors coming in doing things, plumbers and electricians, and that. As before I got on YouTube videos, learn how to do some of this stuff myself. But that's how you do it. You pay somebody else to do it. You watch how they do it, and then you do it the next time. And I remember watching it. The boys were young. You know, this is when they were in their early teens or not even teens. And I'm watching these guys, especially the plumbers. I don't know what it is about plumbers, but I said, guys, come here. Let me tell you something. When you get older and you get busy doing stuff and you learn things, here's what you got to do. Show up on time, maybe a few minutes early, be professional, know how to do your job, clean up after you're done. This is easy stuff. And follow up with the customer. If you do those things, you will dominate any industry because no one else is doing that. Okay? Show up on time. Be professional, clean up, and follow up. You do that, that's what it's all about. That's business. And a lot of them are doing that. And they listen to me. It's amazing. They listen to me on that. All right, I've got a moment here. I want to read something out of a book here. This is called Leaders of Men, which Noah bought for me for Christmas. And it's at least 100 years old. I love these kind of books. Now I'm going to read you one little paragraph here. They don't write like this anymore. And if I mispronounce a word, Stephanie will help me out. This is a chapter called industry, and industry just means work. And I'll tell you ahead of time, it mentions a clod. And for those of you that don't know, a clod is a lump of dirt. Okay. Let the young man remember there is nothing derogatory in any employment which ministers to the well-being of the race. Okay, any employment. It is the spirit that is carried into an employment that elevates or degrades it. The spirit. The plowman that turns the clod may be George Washington, or he may be a brother to the clod he turns. It is every way creditable to handle a yardstick and to measure tape. The only discredit consists in having a soul whose range of thought is as short as the stick and as narrow as the tape. See, so it's not what you're doing necessarily that's wrong, it's what you're bringing into it. Are you lazy? Are you late? Are you not trained to do a job and not finding out how? You see, we need to be expert. The psalm I left out, it says, God looks upon the excellent in the world. He wants you to be excellent in your stewardship of all the things, what he's asked you to do. All of those things. All right, very good. Now, I want you to consider very carefully this verse, and we're just wrapping up with a few more points. So thank you for your patience. I love this verse, similar to the Ecclesiastes verse. Whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord, for you serve the Lord Christ. Anything left out there? Whatever you do, dishes or diapers, do it heartily as unto the Lord. And it is the Lord Christ whom you serve. When you go to work tomorrow, guess what? You're serving the Lord Christ. That's what it says. The Puritans were right. Your work is your worship. Part of it. It's not just Sunday. It's not just devotion time. It's in the day-to-day activities which God has given you stewardship over. Your time, your body, your money, all those things I mentioned. It's all part of this. Whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord. Now, this word heartily in the original language of the Greek is this word, exuke. Does that look like anything to you? Psychology, see that? This is how that works. And it's a two-part word. Ek means out, and suke or psyche, we would pronounce it, means it's a word that's used for your soul or your heart. So literally that word means whatever you do, do it out of your heart. Your very soul should be in it. You think J.S. Bach's soul was in his compositions? Oh yeah, sure was. And how about you? How about the things that you do? Cleaning houses, doing IT work, all of this stuff. It all can be part of this. That it can be out of our soul and an act of worship, something that God looks with favor upon, that you do a good job. Doesn't matter what it is. You could be Washington or you could be the clod. You know, it's up to you. And that's what God wants in your responsibility and your stewardship. Do it heartily. Do it exuke, out of your heart, out of your soul. All right, just some last points here in stewardship. Getting to Luke 16 finally, which is where most of the references to steward and stewardship are found. Let's pull out three simple points as we wrap up. Luke 16:10 and 11 says, one who is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. Okay, I would say based on that, stewardship is incremental. Remember Joseph in the Bible? He was a steward in his house, faithful steward. He was a faithful steward in prison. And ultimately, he was elevated to be second in command in all of Egypt. And he was faithful in that stewardship as well. You see that? He was faithful in a little, very little, is faithful also in much. So maybe you're being faithful, maybe you're a young person here in your family, a child, and you're trying to please your parents and doing the things that they want. That's a little, that's good. It's a very little maybe. But there's going to be more in your life. It's incremental. And you don't have to worry about being second in command of Egypt quite yet. You just be faithful in the things God has put in front of you, and you watch what happens. God will do it. You know, we like to say, how you do anything is how you do everything. You be faithful in small things. I talked about personal development seminars. You got to go listen to some Jim Rohn sometime. Genius, wise man. He talks about giving a child $1, and his funny accent. He goes, and you tell him, don't spend the whole $1. No, you don't do that. You take a little bit out. You put some here. You put some for savings, some for yourself, some for. Faithful in a little, faithful in much. You always wonder why, these young athletes that get multi-million-dollar contracts end up in jail, some of them. Well, they don't know how to handle things. They've not been faithful in a little. So you need to teach your kids to be faithful in a little. Now, this is Luke 12, the other passage in Luke where you'll see the steward come up. And in verse 42, it says, who then is that faithful and wise steward whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household? Whoa, that's where you're headed. If you're faithful and wise, you're going to end up being ruler of the house. And then it says, to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. And I say these are sort of interdependent, these points. Stewardship is expectant. Doesn't have anything to do with pregnancy. It's the only word I could come up with. It's expectant. In other words, it expects something else. To whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more, and you should ask the more. Now let's make this real practical. Say you're here in the meeting, and maybe you get up and share some in the remembrance meeting, and you do that faithfully, just a little, just faithful in a little. Well, you should expect some more. You should do some more. And then ultimately, the leaders or people in the chapel should be looking over these things and seeing who is faithful in a little. Let's give them more. Give them something else to do. And this is just what shepherding should be. Looking out and seeing who is being faithful in something. And if you don't see anything out there, if no one is being faithful, make assignments. Say, I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to do this. Watch that, monitor those things, and then elevate them to something else. Not necessarily speaking all the time. It could be other kinds of service, help somebody be in charge of something, and so forth. And you can do that in your personal life too. Look for more. Maybe at work. Maybe you say, I want to maybe commit your work to the Lord. Your plans will be established. You say, I want to have a closer relationship with my boss. I want to be accountable to him. Show him what I've done and all of that. You do that faithfully. He's going to notice. She's going to notice. You could be elevated. You could be promoted, get a raise, something like that, because you've committed that to the Lord. So faith, stewardship is incremental. It grows incrementally. It's expectant. You should look for other opportunities, and those that are watching over you should be looking to give those opportunities. And then finally, 16:11 here says, if then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, that's the odd verse in this parable here, who will entrust to you the true riches? Well, let's turn that around. Let's make that positive. You want to do that? If you're faithful in unrighteous wealth, I'll entrust you with true riches. Oh, there's something more? Yes, far more. And this gets back to my original point. Everyone will give an account of himself to God. There are rewards in heaven. I don't think we fully understand this, and maybe we will never understand it except what it says, is there are rewards for behavior. We know these parables about the minas and the talents and so forth. And so their stewardship is motivational. If I'm being faithful in something, God says, I've got something else for you. Check this box off. We're moving on to another one. That's what happened to Joseph. Why did he end up being who he was? It's because of how he performed in every step along the way. So stewardship is that. You should say, and I really believe you should say this, I will do this faithfully, Lord, so you and receive that, and you may provide something else for me, something better. Paul did that. He said, I know that I've done this right, and I'm going to receive a crown. He said that. They're not pride or arrogance. That's just the way it is. That's God's economy. So incremental, expectant, motivational, stewardship, management. Stewardship's better. So just to sum it up here, instead of this, the responsibility and management of a household, how about this? Stewardship is taking care of things that God's entrusted to you. He has entrusted many things to you. We can go into greater detail maybe at another time. So remember, he gives you the ability in your stewardship to do what God wants. You have a responsibility to do it. God expects the best from you. He wants the best from you. He's not a hard taskmaster. He's a great, kind encourager. And you're accountable to God for the things which you steward. If you're reckless with your money, guess what? You're going to go broke. And things aren't going to turn out very well for you. Accountability. If you're good with your money, God's going to give you more probably, because he knows he can trust you. We read that he looked at Abraham and he said, I want to know what kind of person he is. And then he found out I can trust him. And then exsuke, do everything from your heart. Love what you're doing. If you don't love what you're doing, start loving what you're doing. If you don't like your job, just start liking your job and go in there and do it the best you can. Jobs are hard. They all are. Okay. Yeah. We'd rather be fishing. I'd rather be playing guitar. But if you got to go to work, and you do, love what you're doing. It'll make your life that much more pleasant, and everybody else will be much more pleasant around you as well, because you won't be as grumpy as you were before. And then these things we just mentioned, incremental, be patient. God will do things as time goes by. Expectant. You should want more than you're doing. You should want greater responsibilities, and you should be motivated, because God has great rewards at the end of it all. Wouldn't you like to hear this? Well done, good and faithful servant. I do. I want to hear that. So commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. And let's just think about stewardship in maybe a fresh way, that we can look at our life, wake up in the morning, thank the Lord for living. It's not too simple. It's fundamental. Put him in place in your life, knowing that he's the owner and you're the steward.